Hello. Hey, gearheads, welcome to Speed City and our post qualifying show for Singapore. I'm Jonathan Green, and alongside me, Bob Varsha. John's got the weekend off this weekend, so we'll battle on without him. But we should be hearing from Chris Medland soon. Bob, an interesting qualifying in a lot of different ways. Not what I was expecting. Certainly when it comes to McLaren not really having the pace here in Singapore. And, well, I don't know. Your thoughts? Verstappen close, but no cigar. And some good stories throughout the grid. Hello. Hey, gearheads, welcome to...
Sorry there, Jonathan.
Hey, Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, we had some technical tangles there. I guess we're okay right now. Yeah, really unusual. Not at all what I expected. I thought McLaren would surge to the fore. You know, Jonathan, I am more or less ready to call this race in favor of Max Verstappen. I mean, yeah, he didn't take the pole, but, you know, the month he's had, 2 Grand Prix victories, a sprint win, as I recall, and a victory in a GT3 race at the Nürburgring that all the other drivers in the pit lane there in this weekend's event have said has made them jealous. I mean, they're all beginning to acknowledge that Max is simply on another level. And I'm prepared to say I think Max is going to win this race simply because, you know, it's just the mode he is in right now. Gets in the car, you know, very little chance of winning the Drivers' Championship. His Red Bull team has already been eliminated from the Constructors' Championship. So he's going to go out there and do what he does. He's going to have fun. He's going to see how far he can push it. And I think everybody else in the field has to be extremely careful with what Max can do this weekend.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation for him. He's, 69 points off the lead. And I guess the word is he's unfettered for the first time in that, you know, there is no pressure on him to do anything, to be honest. The championship in his mind is gone, but he can be winning races all day long. And there's every chance he could win it here, as you could predict. And there's every chance that he could do it again in Austin. So, very interesting indeed. I can see that Mr. Medland is lighting up. Christopher, how are you?
Hello, team. I'm very good. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We were just saying how shocked, horror, gasp we are from that qualifying. Didn't expect it to go the way it did.
No, nor me. Mercedes had looked good at times during this weekend, but I did not have them as a pole contender. If anything, I actually thought that we saw pace, if not full lap times put together from Ferrari that suggested if anyone was going to emerge to challenge Verstappen and McLaren, it would be Ferrari. But yeah, it really seemed to get away from McLaren as the evening went on. And it's so strange to go into Q3 and certainly the second runs and think neither McLaren's really in the fight here. But just picking up on actually what Bob was saying there, and what both of you were saying actually about Max, I think it's so exciting that Red Bull has nothing to lose at all. Can absolutely go for it, be aggressive with everything they do. Very simple now strategically for them. Every time they approach everything, they can just take the highest risk approach for the highest reward. Because as you say, huge outsiders in the title fight. But if they take that approach and get some wins under their belt, then maybe they can come back into it.
Yeah, they're definitely...
And we saw that today. Like Max, go ahead.
Well, sorry, we're breaking up there, Chris. You know, they're such a different team, it seems. I mean, you would know better. You've been in their garages since the summer break. Laurent Mekies' contribution, if you will, has been sort of sub rosa. It's been quiet, but effective. And they've got a better race car now. They've been listening to their drivers. Max is driving with a renewed vigor, it seems. So, yeah, suddenly they got nothing to lose. And they're going after it. And that's got to be a difficult thing for the rest of the pit lane to take on.
Absolutely. That final run in Q3 was a great signal of it. So Lando went first of all the drivers because he was probably feeling like the most out of position where he was in fifth, but didn't want to potentially get the impact of a red flag or a yellow flag that would scupper his lap. But it meant he wasn't going to get the track evolution. So he went first to play it safe, like he did in Baku. Didn't pay off, didn't improve. But Verstappen, because he's thinking of just beating everyone, and Red Bull are thinking risk it, was very much the last car on the track. So it could have gone wrong. There could have been an interruption and he wouldn't have got that lap in. As it happens, it seems that he was very upset with Norris cruising back to the pits in front of him and maybe disrupting the end of his lap. But that was them going for the best track evolution they could get and taking that gamble. So I think we'll see something similar tomorrow when it comes to strategy, the way they approach the race. Like you say, Max actually does have nothing to lose, and it means he can be as aggressive as he wants, but so can Red Bull and everything they do.
You could argue, though, that George Russell, in many ways, is also unfettered. He's not, he's not either one of the McLaren drivers, let's put it that way. And that was a heck of a lap. And again, we could see a nice knockdown, drag-out scrap between those two, with McLaren being a little bit more guarded, or at least Piastri wanting just to guard his position this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I don't think Mercedes really came into this weekend thinking they'd be fighting for pole. So as they found that sweet spot, I think that was just a kind of a happy outcome where they were like, oh, great, this is better than we expected. But as you say, with the position they're in, with the fight for second in the constructors, as much as all of those teams want to win that fight, I don't think they feel the pressure of that fight. So, yeah, they kind of threw caution to the wind a bit. And it just shows how good the car was how quick Antonelli had been for most of it as well. He didn't quite get it together in Q3. He put himself on the back foot with a few mistakes, didn't he? But he was still right up there in that mix too. But Russell showing again to Mercedes and to Toto Wolff, because he doesn't have a contract yet, that he will deliver when he's got the car.
Can I pick you up there? I mean, Bob and Chris, what is going on? What's Toto up to? I mean, you can't say, oh, well, we'll get to it. I mean, his career's on the line here. This is not good.
Well,
he's not going anywhere, is he? He's got no other option that's a good enough seat to move into. I don't think Red Bull are about to poach him. I don't think they can. Mercedes have to approve that with the current deal they have and structure in place. But I think George is trying to kind of win every tiny little battle on any detail he can with that contract, just because that's all he can win. Mercedes also manage him, so he can't walk away from it. He's going to eventually agree a deal, but he's trying to wield some form of power, I think. And in many ways, fair play to him. The longer he's held on as such, or made it difficult to finally get the deal done himself as well, then the more he's proven to the team what he's worth and that they should give him everything he's asking for.
Yeah, and a lot of that is very subtle. I mean, George was saying in recent publications, it's not just about money, although he probably earned himself a few 100,000 more today by taking pole position for tomorrow's race. But he's also talked about the stuff that you used to hear drivers complain about all the time, away from the racetrack, away from my physical training, all the other stuff that I have to do as a Formula One driver, the media sessions, the sponsor commitments, flying here and there, to shake hands and kiss babies and do all the things that we don't even think of as being part of a Formula One driving career. George has basically said, I want less of that. And we've heard that from other drivers over the years. It's just such a grind, this business of just getting it. It's more than getting in a race car and driving it. The other thing that has been really interesting this weekend to me is the number of yellow flags. I mean, Friday's practice was ruined by red flags. And then Saturday we had some more this morning, and we had various violations of yellow flags that may yet impact the grid for tomorrow's race, although I don't think there's going to be too much. It's been a very busy weekend in a way that I don't connect with Singapore. I thought it was fairly clean place in the past, even though it's a street circuit and the walls are right there where the curb should be. It's been a messy weekend thus far, and that could make for a really interesting race.
Yeah, no question. And, the heat in Singapore, you saw that they tried to do the interviews there with all three of them just because it's so hot and humid. And it is a factor for sure in Singapore. You're in the city. I've been to that Grand Prix. And if there is no wind off the sea sort of thing, it just gets hotter than heck. And it really is a tough city to be wandering around because the heat bounces literally off the high-rise buildings. You live in Atlanta, Bob, you know what I'm talking about.
Big glassy buildings all around. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Johnny, you know this part of the world well, so you do know how warm it gets. But qualifying is not the session that really tests these drivers, and I'm pretty sure that was a a nice excuse to say, we just want to put some personalities together and see if we can get them talking amongst themselves and maybe a bit of needle coming out and things like that, just to try something different for entertainment purposes rather than driver welfare. Maybe if it was post-race, I could understand it. But at this point, I think that was just to see if they would give us a little bit more tasty comments when they got out the cars. But I'm actually just trying to line up someone before we move on who will probably be pleased with what he's seen. But he's actually talking to his future employers. I'm going to grab him now. Not Valtteri Bottas, who's running somewhere. But Valtteri, I know you're chatting Cadillac there. Running to the airport. You're out of here?
I'm out of here. My job is done.
What car's on pole position for Mercedes, you're finished?
Exactly, and I take all the credit, of course. You know?
Oh, well done. Well done today. What did you tell George then?
No, nothing. I just let him do what he was doing. He was doing well. And actually, Kimi was doing really well as well. But just that last lap in Q3 was a bit sketchy at the end. But, it happens. But still, he won. P4, not bad.
Surprising that it was this quick? Was Mercedes expecting to be in the fight for pole here?
Before the weekend, I knew, there would be a decent chance for the team. Because it's kind of Baku-ish like track, of course, different temperatures. But based on what we saw in practice, it looked pretty good. And we thought it's going to be like close fight for the pole. And slightly surprised, but we kind of expected that there is a chance.
Well, you are leaving. We're at the paddock gates, everyone, I can tell you. So before I hold you up too much more for your flight, how are you going to follow the race? And are Mercedes going to win this race?
I will be watching it from afar. Yeah, I'll be following.
And can they win?
I think we can. Here, if you start from pole, if you have a good start, there is a chance to control the race. And there's another car in row 2, which can help. So, I think there's a real chance for the win.
All right, well, safe flight and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you. See you soon.
Great stuff, Chris. Is it me, or when he says I'm watching it from afar, do I get this Lawrence of Arabia feel of him sitting on a camel wandering across the desert watching Formula One? I just, that's how I feel with Valtteri these days.
Yeah. He's still got that sense of humor, obviously. He's all set to take credit for George's pole. I wonder if where he's going has anything to do with the Cadillac F1 simulator or, somewhere involved with the team, perhaps at Silverstone. I'm just so happy that Valtteri Bottas is going to be back in the series.
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with those two drivers.
I think so.
In Perez and Bottas. Listen, let's take a short break. We're watching and listening and talking about the post-qualifying for Singapore. George Russell's just taken a surprising pole position. But after the break, I want to talk about what happened at the bottom, the other end of the grid, because it's just as surprising. We'll be right back after this. So let's see what the the internets are saying. I didn't see how Oscar's pit entry ahead of Max's final lap. Do we think that Max was genuinely waylaid by Norris? I don't know. I don't think.
Yeah,
so.
I saw the onboard, and because Lando is cruising through the chicane, he's kind of disturbed the air there. So when Max goes chucking it into the first part of the chicane, he loses the rear and runs wide. So then he backs out of it. And drives past Norris and kind of gives him he actually gives him a sarcastic thumbs up to be like, well done. So yeah, he was annoyed by that. And it is the sort of thing that drivers, dare I say, it's the sort of thing they call dirty tricks. It's not going to get you a penalty for impeding, but it will be felt by the car behind. Sometimes they're just not paying enough attention to that. They're cruising back to the pits on their own and they know that a car's not going to catch them. So they just go in at their own speed, but then it impacts things.
When, Verstappen pulled off on his final lap of qualifying, he aborted. And was that his call or was that the, GP saying?
That's just what I'm saying, Bob. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It was Lando getting in his way, creating some dirty air for him. It caused him to run wide into the kind of start of that fast chicane at the end of the lap. So he knew that the lap was getting away from him and it was because of the car in front. So he then lifted off and aborted and drove next to the McLaren to put his thumb up to sarcastically say, well done.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so he was not happy. And his comment then afterwards was pretty pointed, wasn't it? He said, it's noted and we'll remember that.
And his engineer came on and said, your mate got in your way or your mate.
Yeah.
Thank your mate for that is what he said.
Yeah. So I think he got, a lack of downforce, so he had understeer and ran wide, and I think they can see that on the data too. but the onboard really showed it. He didn't look out of control or anything. He just went deep at the first part of the chicane.
I'm George Russell, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back, everyone. We are looking at post-qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix, which takes place tomorrow. Interesting qualifying session. We've been talking about the top guys, and obviously Russell getting the pole, Verstappen getting balked in his mind. And I think after our discussion just a moment ago, I think Chris has given me a fair amount of understanding that that's why he let off the gas in that final few corners and didn't get the lap he wanted. Even so, he is right where he needs to be at the sharp end and will be a thorn in Russell's side. But as we've been discussing, both those drivers, that's Russell and Verstappen, could go for it tomorrow because the McLarens didn't qualify where they wanted to. But I want to go back to Q1 and talk about how Alpine were nowhere. Again, Stroll 17th, Tsunoda 15th, Lawson 14th, and both Williams 12th and 13th. And yet the other side of the spectrum is that Behrman was flying. Chris or Bob, anybody you want to point to there that should have gone better?
Tsunoda, to be honest.
Yes,
if you
definitely.
look at the way he'd been performing last time out in Baku, we've just heard from Valtteri Bottas there that there's some similarities. That Red Bull is a car that's improving. It really did feel like all the ingredients were there for him to have another solid weekend at least. And he just looked off for most of the weekend. And going into qualifying, after the first runs, I actually really feared for him. I thought he was going to end up dead last. So he at least put together a decent lap despite those yellow flags. And I think they're still looking at those from where Gasly stopped in Q1. Tsunoda's got to go to the stewards, so too are both Sauber cars of Hulkenberg and Bortoletto. The other one was George Russell, but that got cleared. So there could be a penalty coming if any of those drivers didn't slow enough for the yellow. But Tsunoda got himself through at least and then could do no more and aborted his lap in Q2. So clearly not happy and just not able to build any momentum. And we're seeing that, actually, another name you gave us there, Liam Lawson. Great result in Baku, great performance. You start to think like he's showing Red Bull to keep hold of him. And then he has 2 crashes this weekend and drops out in Q2 where he's clearly had a messy one and not able to pull it out. So, yeah, I think both of those stand out to me.
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't help that Hadjar's going so well as well for Lawson. You're right. This is not what he wanted out of this weekend so far, and it's not the weekend he was planning on for sure. Because you're right, he needs to show that he is worthy of the seat. I mean, I hate to say it, but he's under pressure again, just to keep the seat he's in. They're talking about Lindblad. They're talking about Hadjar going up in place of Tsunoda, which could drop Tsunoda back and make it a Lawson-Tsunoda combination. Or potentially Red Bull doing what Red Bull does and bring Lindblad in. So, nothing's safe yet.
Not at all. I mean, we're hearing Red Bull, they're interested in Alex Dunn as well, who's just left McLaren. Not a, want of a better term, done deal. But it sounds like if that were to happen, it would be a seat potentially in 27 in F1 and that 26 would see him remain in F2. But that shows long-term planning. That shows, okay, we're going to promote Lindblad, for example. And if we do that, then who might we want coming through on the conveyor belt next? Well, if you're doing all of that, you're not keeping your current drivers, are you? Or you're not saying that all 4 of them are going to stay put. So that adds to the pressure as well. It's not an easy scenario to be in, I think, to find stability. And I did ask Liam Lawson about that on Thursday, actually. He said he's never felt settled in his F1 career. But he does think that is the case for pretty much every driver, unless you're one of the very top ones on a long-term contract. And even then, he said contracts can be broken if you really underperform. But he said, he's just been used to it throughout the Red Bull junior program. Everything that Red Bull does in the way it's set up means that this is not alien to him, at least. But it isn't easy to handle.
Yeah, no question. I've always felt that about Red Bull, full stop, is that, we're looking at Dennis Hauger right now, just finished his test in IndyCar and looks as though having won the Indy Next Championship. Now, he was a Red Bull junior and had all the colors all the way up to his Formula 2 days and, then got let go. So, they're quite happy to let real talent go And it is a maelstrom place to be as a junior driver. I would not want to be in that program.
Yeah, we heard recently from Alex Dunn after he left McLaren. I'm sorry, I'm talking about Alex Dunn, but I meant Liam Lawson, who said, Formula One is not necessarily my ultimate goal anymore. It was very recently, but it's not anymore. So that makes you wonder what's going on, whether he's had conversations with the team who've told him what to consider his future as being. I mentioned Dunn because folks at Red Bull have been saying he's their kind of guy. He's aggressive, he's quick, yada, yada, yada. So, this season we saw this wave of a half dozen talented rookies into Formula One. I don't know that we're going to see that many next year.
Good point. I was talking about the back end of the grid, Bob. Anything you want to make note of? I mentioned that Williams 12th and 13's disappointment after their good run of form of late.
Yeah. I don't know. I found myself cheering for Fernando Alonso, leading for his practice and, having some upbeat performances of late and saying next year may be his last season if Aston Martin comes up with a good competitive car. So, I've always got my eye out for Fernando, but I'd have to admit that I expected a little more from him in qualifying here. Plus, he's knows this track well. I believe he's won here before. So, just him. It was a bit of a disappointment today. Kind of expected more from Sainz as a former winner of this race. Although both of the Williams wound up 12th and 13th. So I guess there's nothing to choose between them. Now down toward the end, maybe Gabriel Bortoleto. He's been doing some fancy qualifying of late. So, it was interesting that he didn't climb that ladder. But I keep thinking back to you just didn't know what you were going to get from one lap to the next starting on Friday morning. Am I going to be able to get a clean run here? Am I going to learn anything about the tires? Am I going to be able to do a qualifying rehearsal? Everybody's sort of been on edge. At least I have, watching them go around. George Russell said he wasn't confident in the track where he has crashed several times in very dramatic circumstances. The defending champion, Lando Norris, come in. He says, I'm not feeling the same things this weekend that I felt last year. So, it's all a bit of a mystery right now. And then you get the guys who have that huge confidence in what they do and how they do it. Guys like Verstappen and George Russell. This is an opportunity for somebody with, all the cogs turning to do something special. It's a good place for those rookies. And we get to this time of year, and I talk about it year after year. A lot of guys are running for a championship position or to help their team in the constructors. But a lot of guys toward that area of the grid that you were just asking about, those guys are driving for their careers. So that's another reason to sort of throw caution to the wind and go that right to the limit and beyond, just to make sure they have something to do next year.
Yeah, but that's true, Bob. But it must be said at the same time, you don't want to then make a big costly mistake that will look so high profile because, it's not just running wide here, is it? And losing a lap time. It's hitting a wall and heavily damaging something.
Absolutely.
But for one of the drivers that I think really impressed me is someone who's not fighting for his future right now, but he is doing a very good job in the Haas. It's Ollie Behrman, who went and qualified in 9th place. So, Ollie, was that on the cards? Did you expect that?
Yes, of course. No, I was happy to be qualifying well today. The car felt good underneath me all day, so good job to the team.
But this is your first time driving here, racing here, getting up to speed. I mean, how tough's it been? Like, you've taken to it so naturally.
Yeah, it's certainly been challenging. But today I felt a much more complete driver than yesterday. I was doing a much better job. It's a bit of the overnight effect. So, yeah, pretty happy with that one.
Tough to overtake here too. Do you feel points on the cards, or are you a bit nervy about A, the conditions? It's going to be a hot one, and B, safety cars.
Yeah, definitely going to be a hot one. Strategically, it's important to do the right thing, but I'm confident that we can do that.
Good luck on what I'd say.
Interesting. I can't sum up Behrman's year this year, except, if I look at the balance, it's good, especially given where he is in his Formula One career. He's impressed me, but it's been up and down, but I suppose that's the way of a Haas driver, right?
Yeah, I mean, that car is not always consistent, is it? But it does have its peaks. I think if we look, I'm stood right now in the paddock, and Haas are next to Racing Bulls, and based on where they finished in the Constructors' Championship last year, they were 7th and 8th in the championship. But that Racing Bulls car is very consistent. We do see pretty much every track we go to, at least one Racing Bulls driver getting themselves into Q2 or Q3. With Haas, we've had times where they are basically slowest, haven't we? Or both drivers out in Q1. There's other ones where Sauber kind of peak and do really well and then drop away. So it's hard to always judge a driver based on that. That's why I dare I say I was maybe a bit harsh on Lawson and the weekend he's had so far. Tsunoda, actually, I'd maybe given a bit more credit to previously, but we're seeing that Red Bull improve now and him not go with it. That's why, again, I'm starting to fear that this was even more damaging than some of the other results he's had. But in the Haas, I think you sometimes have to just go, well, actually, this track doesn't suit this car. And Esteban Ocon didn't even make it out of Q1. So for Behrman to get through to Q3 is impressive.
Yeah, and do we read anything into Tsunoda not having that front wing?
Potentially. I mean, that front wing was designed to bring a step in performance again, and it was an improvement where Red Bull, their chief engineer Paul Monahan, explains that they saw when they brought their last front wing and it worked, and the way it worked, they saw areas to improve it further and exploit more performance from that concept and take another iteration of it. So there was clear confidence that was going to provide an actual direct gain. So that's why they put the resource behind getting it developed and getting it quickly to the track. And they've done that a number of occasions this year. The floor, for example, that they brought to Monza, that did clearly work, but also that was only on Verstappen's car in Monza. Then Tsunoda got it in Baku. Both cars went pretty well in Baku, but the gap was still big between the two. But a good result that Tsunoda got there. Here, yes, you've got to mention that the specs are different. So that will play a part, and it is a very close field. So normally you go, a little bit of credit where it's due, that if you've got very, very small gaps, if you don't have the same machinery, then that's quite a few positions. But the gap was not small between Tsunoda and Verstappen today, nor yesterday. The gap was well over a second on a couple of the runs. So I think there's a bit more to it than that, and maybe it's driver confidence, but that was I think a damaging one for Yuki.
Well, listen, we're going to take another short break, but after the break, I want to talk about the team that we've not mentioned, and that, of course, is Ferrari. They're kind of lost in the midfield somewhat. And also, I'd like to, again, talk about these upgrades that are happening so long into the season. We just mentioned Red Bulls there. I'm just astonished and wonder if we've got an answer for that, or is it just that everybody's desperate to try to wring out the best of these 25 machines? Well, anyway, we'll find out the answer to that. We'll ask Chris Medland. We'll take a short break here on Speed City. We'll be right back with more of our post-qualifying show.
Still live.
Yeah, we're still on, Chris, if you've got...
Yeah, that was Cassidy Towers saying hello and starting to try and chat, and I was like, sorry, it's still live.
Good on you. Yeah, is there a conversation
radio
to be had about Ferrari? I mean, we always expect something from Leclerc in a qualifying situation, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, I'm actually going to head back down and see if Fred is still talking. He might be done now. I was hovering by him, but when you wanted to talk about the back of the grid, I went to that end of the pit lane, and that worked out nicely because I got Ollie there. But I think Fred might have gone to give us any answers. I think they'll be disappointed.
Thanks for that explanation, Chris. There you go.
They are welcome.
And then our friend from Thailand says, I read that Toto won't let Bottas do any Cadillac stuff.
So I think he'll let him do some, but I don't think that's where he's going right now. I don't think they would let him leave here if there's any use from here, but also to then go and directly work on something that Cadillac are doing. I can see, they are running simulator drivers. They're doing stuff, simulating race weekends at Cadillac, but I just don't think Merck would say, go ahead on a race day Sunday, when normally we do see Valtteri in the garage following. So maybe I'm wrong. He did talk to Cadillac as he left, because we've got Graham Loudon and Dan Towers here. They've shown up today, I believe. So they're here in the paddock, and that's who Valtteri spoke to before leaving. But I don't think he was heading to do any of that work. But then maybe, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go and do an off-record, seeing as we're in a break. I'm going to see if I can get an answer on that and see if Loudon or Dan will tell me if that's what he's doing.
Good point. Yeah, no question. And I was really interested to talk to maybe discuss those sim drivers you mentioned. Very interesting choice, especially with Simon Pagenaud. Really happy for him, because what a value to bring a guy like that.
Do we happen to know, has Simon been completely cleared to resume racing if he wanted to, or has he been told in the wake of that jarring accident that he should not?
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to
Welcome
Speed
back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to Speed City. We are looking at Singapore and post-qualifying ahead of the Singapore Grand Prix for 2025. Interestingly enough, the one race that Max Verstappen has never won. He's won every race on the calendar but Singapore, and he's never taken pole position either, and he didn't today. But I think he's in a position to win it this time. I mentioned before the break, Bob, Chris has gone off to see what he can sniff out. But I mentioned before the break, Ferrari. You surprised or not surprised?
I don't think either word is appropriate. I am disappointed that Ferrari has not put up a bigger fight. But that's their reputation now. It just endures that Ferrari will come up short. Granted, it's been difficult for them recently. Lewis has been through this very public heartbreak over having to put his beloved bulldog Roscoe to sleep. And the public response that has been huge, which I think tends to make a guy like Lewis feel even worse, because obviously Roscoe meant so much to so many people. But we don't have an idea of the inner workings at Ferrari right now. I saw something interesting from Red Bull the other day, who said, we basically had our last upgrade through the end of the season. It's all going to be down to the drivers at this point, because we've got the manufacturing crew back at the factory busily at work on next year's car. And I'm sure that's true for every team up and down the pit lane. They don't want to be bothered with the rest of the season. Not that it's annoying, but they don't want to be, spending their time crafting new parts for the remaining 7 races of the season. They want to get their 2026 creation together, because they're going to be testing just in a few months. And I suspect there's a certain amount of that going on at Ferrari too.
Yeah, and that's what surprises me, if you like, by Red Bull bringing new floors and new wings so late into the season, and other teams too, trying to squeeze everything out of the 25 car.
Right.
And it just surprises me. Usually we get to May and we're done, in terms of major upgrades. But it's just been the way of the last few years of modern Formula One, is that people are tweaking here and there, and I guess that's just the world we're in at the moment. But you're right. I think Ferrari maybe have gone traditional and said, right, look, we're not going to win this year, so let's come. Whereas Red Bull, obviously, they're still in the hunt. So, yeah, makes sense.
I mean, to be fair, we only had Mercedes and Red Bull with any new parts here. Mercedes had some new front wing flaps. Red Bull with the whole front wing iteration. But there's also their 2 teams that were not in the top 2 in the championship last year, therefore have a tiny bit more of wind tunnel time and CFD time based on this sliding scale that we now use in F1. And that just might have meant they felt the freedom to use just one of those runs just to verify something before manufacturing it, if they felt they had the capacity to do it financially. Also, it will depend on things like crash damage and whether we've got to this point in the season and they feel that their cars haven't been overly impacted by that. Mercedes maybe have, with some of the instances that they've had at different times. They've had quite a few moments. But Red Bull, not so much. So maybe they found, okay, we don't need all that money for spares. We've got a little bit of that still in the budget that we can use to build 2 of this new wing, for example. And we have the wind tunnel time just to verify it's right. So let's do it. Push the button, turn it around quickly. And I think that that could have been how that's come about. But you're right, we're not getting much else from anybody else. So it's not just Ferrari, but some others. I was surprised by Ferrari's pace. I did think there was actually more in it for them. I don't think they got it all together today. But Hamilton actually had a solid one. He wasn't quite quick enough to be in the fight for pole, but he did out-qualify Leclerc, and he looked during qualifying that little bit more settled than we've seen recently. But I'm going to steal someone else's stat. I'm pretty sure this is the first time that Hamilton has qualified outside the top 5 in Singapore. And he was 6th. But I think it is actually the first time outside the top 5. So it does show his standard round here, and that he is good round here. He's used to performing on this track, even when the car hasn't been all that competitive. Someone might want to shoot that one down, I admit. Like I said, there's a stat I overheard in the press room rather than did my research on. So YouTubers, feel free to shout at me if I've plagiarized an incorrect stat. But that's what I was told.
Okay. I do it all the time.
Well, listen, guys, let's look ahead.
I just wanted to quickly, Johnny, follow up because you said I was off sniffing things out. I went and checked with Cadillac off record. I say off record, off mic. It was on record. That Valtteri is not going to go and do anything for them tomorrow. He's off doing his own thing. And that Mercedes would not allow that. We're right. Toto would not allow them to go and do something with him over a race weekend. So he's off for personal reasons or whatever it is that he wants to go and do elsewhere. But yeah, he was genuinely heading to the airport straight after qualifying. So the life of a reserve driver.
Not easy.
Well, one other thing we need to keep in mind, and all this talk about manufacturing capacity and so on, you need to have an idea what to do. If the engineers all look at each other in a meeting and scratch their head, what can we do to solve whatever problem? And even if there's not a problem, you're just not as quick as you want to be. How can we improve for the races still to come? So you need the budget, you need the manpower, and you need an idea.
Yep. And in the last couple of minutes we got, guys, I just want to turn our attention to the race itself. What do we think tactically? One stop is the usual, but do we see a little bit of interplay between the teammates at Ferrari, at McLaren? Verstappen's on his own, obviously, but where do we see a little, and maybe even Mercedes working together? What do we see tactically, strategically tomorrow?
Well, keeping in mind, bring up on that. Sorry, I want to jump in here, Bob, because one of them is you won't see anything from technically from Williams on the grid. Both cars have been pinged for essentially having DRS slots that are too big. So they failed scrutineering after qualifying. So they've been referred to the stewards, and unless there's some weird force majeure reason, which very rarely you get, especially when it's both cars, that's going to be a slam dunk exclusion for both cars from qualifying. So you're going to have both Williams drivers at the very back, if not starting from the pit lane if they make changes. Yeah. So, that's just come through on my emails.
Oh, boy.
What about McLaren then, strategy-wise, or Ferrari?
Well, keep in mind, this the pit lane speed limit has been changed for this weekend, went from 60 to 80 kilometers an hour. So your pit stops are going to be quicker, which would tempt you perhaps to use a pit stop when you otherwise might not, simply because you have those extra seconds in the pit lane in hand. So depending on the circumstances, it could be a 1 or a 2 stop, nothing more than that, I'm sure. And as always, it'll depend on the tires and what your tire strategy is and how the wear turns up. Now, this track has been evolving, getting rubbered up. There's no rain potential that I know of to wash away that extra grip. So other than that, I would be tempted to say it's a 1 stop if you think you can get away with it. Otherwise, it's a 2 stop if you need to slap on a new set of softs at the end to make up some positions, or vice versa, do it at the start.
And really, Norris only comes into play if he gets up the board a bit.
Yeah, that's true. And that's where the start will be crucial. It is tough to overtake here, but I'm with Bob. We've got this unknown now with the shorter time loss in the pit lane. It was estimated to me, I actually hosted an event with Ruth Buscombe, the strategist, yesterday. She said she thinks it's about 6 seconds now that you gain as such by going 80 kph rather than 60. So instead of what was a 28.5 second pit lane loss previously here, it'd be around 22.5, which does mean if you make 2 stops, that's 12 seconds quicker to make those 2 stops in terms of race time than if you made those 2 stops with the old speed limit. That does move it closer. It does open it up, that potential for a 2-stop strategy. And the fact that we had so much interrupted running in FP2 yesterday means nobody did any high fuel running in FP2 in the only representative session. So no one really knows the tyre deg in these conditions over a long run. So everyone's going to be, going into it with an unknown. And I think they will target one stop, but it could evolve quickly during the race, as you say, Bob. So I think we're going to see the strategists really earning their money tomorrow.
And the potential for another interruption is quite high, I would say, given the crashing we've seen already this weekend. So, you have to plot on what do we do for a yellow flag? What do we do in a red flag situation? All the normal stuff. But the potential for an interruption here is fairly high.
Yeah, that's what makes it so tough is that, you have all the plans in the world, but the minute somebody goes into the wall at turn 5 in the first lap, it all goes out the windows in many ways. So, yeah. Last thoughts on this, Chris? You're there, you're on the ground as you go to your desk to write for Racer Magazine and Motorsport. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, one, I'm intrigued to hear actually what the Ferrari drivers have to say about how today panned out, whether that was a bit of a missed opportunity from them. But I really want to hear from McLaren too, if they are worried now, because as much as we've got to praise George Russell, great job from him, great job from Mercedes. This is a track, as you pointed out, that Max Verstappen and Red Bull have not been quick at in the past. And they were quicker than McLaren today, and they were comfortably quicker than them in qualifying trim. It could well be that Max goes ahead and takes more points out than McLaren's at a track they really would not have expected that to happen a couple of weeks ago. And it could be title race game on. So, yeah, I want to hear if they're nervy.
Last thought,
keep in mind, 13-point gap in the Constructors' Championship. Normally, going back to previous races this year, you'd say, no big deal. McLaren's going to clinch that second Constructors' Championship consecutive this weekend, just putting one car on the podium. But there's issues. They got a lot of work to do to get there.
Well, thanks, Bob Varsha, and thank you, Chris Medland. We will all be back tomorrow for the Singapore Grand Prix for 2025, but we leave you with the thought that King George is the man of Singapore. He is the pole position man. Somewhat of a surprise to see Mercedes up there, but we're pleased all the same. Verstappen is going to be a factor, and the McLarens have got some work to do, given the fact that they have not qualified in the top 3. We'll see you tomorrow.